Alright, so let's talk about this Microsoft E3 event that just finished up. It's 7:13 p.m. here where I am, and it started at 5. Ended around maybe like 6:30 or so. Yeah. It's not going to be my usual audio quality either. I just had to refill some motor oil in my car, and I actually wanted to just run the car for a few minutes, let it sit, and then check the dipstick. So what better time to make this video than while I'm chatting inside my car, waiting for, just letting the engine run for a bit. Anyways, I want to talk about how this event basically is going to be affecting Xbox's future, and seeing just how right or wrong I actually was about my predictions and fears and other stuff that I was talking about for Microsoft for the past year or so. So I'm going to start with the good things in this conference. The good thing is the Xbox One X, as expected, is a pretty freaking impressive piece of hardware, and I don't mean just in terms of hardware strength, I mean really in terms of engineering. They're doing, like, it's actually a lot slimmer than even the Xbox One S. We're actually going to see a system that is either the same size as or smaller than the PS4 Pro, that when it has a significantly more powerful GPU, so that's fairly impressive. And there were a few cool games announced. We're getting another Ori game, which I'm totally okay with. Blind Forest was great. We're seeing Crackdown 3, which they had Terry Crews in that trailer. We're finally seeing Crackdown 3. That game actually looks really cool. And God, I totally forgot the name of this one. I'm gonna put it up in the, like, on the screen here. But there was this awesome platformer, Lucky Tales or something like that. Seeing a platformer announced for the Xbox was definitely a nice breath of fresh air, for sure. Because, you know, the Xbox has pretty much had a problem with having just drivers and shooters, and, you know, that's not good enough for a game's library. In addition, at least when the show picked up past its first few games shown off, the pacing was pretty decent. Nobody on stage was, like, tripping over words. Nothing was overly awkwardly presented. They did a very good job on the actual presentation front, and the pacing was good. I mean, it was basically game after game after game, pretty much rapid fire at some points. And I gotta give them credit. That was pretty good. Like, that's the kind of stuff we want to see from every single person who's up at E3. And to be honest, like, Nintendo's doing their pre-recorded direct, so you know they're not really gonna have anything overly screwy in terms of, like, bad presentation due to people tripping over words or whatever. But Sony isn't exactly known for having the best E3 conferences when it comes to that stuff. They show off some amazing content, but their presentation is usually pretty bad. Awkward presentations dating back years. Like, everyone knows Giant Enemy Crab, $599 US, all sorts of fun stuff there. So I want to get into the bad about this conference. The thing I want to start with is, so everyone knows that the major criticism of the Xbox One this generation is the fact that it just doesn't have any enticing offerings, or that many enticing offerings, and that Nintendo and Sony are curb stomping them when it comes to exclusives. And in this conference, we got, well, basically the big criticism besides that is when they do release exclusives, they're almost always driving and shooting games, and not really much else. So what did we see this conference? It started with Forza Motorsport 7, which I'm interested to see how that stacks up with Gran Turismo Sport. Those two are going to be pretty much going head-to-head when they come out. Those will be the ultimate, by the way, PS4 Pro and Xbox One X comparison games are those two games, because they pretty much can push the limits of those hardware. But it started with Forza Motorsport 7, a driving game, and then they showed off, like, 10 shooters. Either multiplats or Xbox exclusives. And when I say Xbox exclusives, I mean they're also being released on PC. Yeah, so we're still having the problem where the Xbox One doesn't actually have any true exclusives because they're all going to be on PC. But basically all we saw were shooters, like 10 shooters and a driving game, with just a few cool games sprinkled here and there. And even those cool games are just cool compared to the other stuff that was shown off in Microsoft's first party. It's like Sea of Thieves was pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to that one. Rare's finally putting out something really good. And, you know, Crackdown 3, Lucky Tales, Ori 2, or whatever you want to call it. but then we had a crap ton of shooters, and that's basically means that they just haven't learned. I'm really sorry, this is not going to be the most structured video in the world. I'm going to trip over my words, I'm going to miss a lot of points, so, you know, don't expect me to go in super detail right now. This is just my first impressions video, and I'm not going to recap the conference or anything. But overall in this conference, in terms of what games were shown off, you can see, actually, if you go on my Twitter, and, you know, you can find my Twitter, I show it on every video, and you can find it in the description. You can see my live tweets while the event was going down, and you can kind of look across Twitter to see how people were reacting. It was a very, very mixed to meh reaction. People were pointing out the fact that there was a lot of shooters being shown off, and there was, like, basically they're trailing behind what Sony and Nintendo are going to show off. Even that Lucky Tales game, which is a totally awesome, like, early 2000s, 90s 3D platformer, and I'm so looking forward to that. That's going to be a day one purchase for me. But it's going to get completely shit-stomped by Super Mario Odyssey, which is coming out around the same time. Forza Motorsport 7. Forza is a respectable racing franchise, but Gran Turismo Sport's coming out, and GT's always been a more... It's always been more of a party, I guess. It's more of a celebration when a Gran Turismo game comes out. I guess those games are taken more seriously. And then just a few other games sprinkled here and there, and then they showed off mostly just third-party games running on the Xbox One X. And the Xbox One X is going to be taking the same exact approach to games that the PS4 Pro is going to be taking, which is just taking existing Xbox One games and giving us higher resolution, or maybe better performance modes, but mostly higher resolution. And to be honest, I think that just like with the PS4 Pro, it's going to be very rare to see a game be upped from 30 frames per second to 60 if the game is 30 FPS on the Xbox One. And the definitive proof for that, you know, besides the fact that Digital Foundry pretty much already confirmed to us that it's not really getting much of a CPU upgrade, is that when they announced the specs of the system and talked about it in the beginning of the conference there, they only mentioned GPU specs. They didn't mention the CPU. And if the CPU is getting like a major upgrade, we would have heard about it. So, and the CPU does limit frame rate. It's not necessarily bottlenecking, but there's certain actions that are required for the CPU to take care of, not the GPU. And bottlenecking of a GPU would be the CPU not being able to draw call fast enough for what the GPU is capable of. If a game is 30 FPS on the Xbox One, it's probably going to be 30 FPS on the Xbox One X, with the occasional game being up to 60 if the game's FPS was being held back by the GPU originally. So basically, it's just taking that same approach. So if you already have an Xbox One, there's not really much of a reason to upgrade. And if you're a hardware enthusiast for crazy good graphics, you're going to be building a PC, and you're going to be going over to PC, which, by the way, you can play every single one of these Xbox One games on. So that pretty much saves the Xbox One X for the enthusiast Xbox crowd who doesn't want to make the jump to PC. And I can't imagine that crowd being very big. It's at least not big enough for Xbox to close the gap with PlayStation. I think that a lot of people online are pretty delusional right now if they think that the Xbox One X is going to close the gap with the PlayStation 4. It's just not going to happen. Especially because the One X costs $499, which is, by the way, is exactly what I predicted it would cost. There's a lot of people thinking it's going to be $399 or $449. No, $499. You know, I predicted that, and along with a lot of other people. And that basically means it's going to be the most powerful console on the market, but also the most expensive console on the market. And like I've said so many times before, the price of a console is a heavy reason for people to not go for something. If something is more expensive, people will flock to the cheaper one. And I put money on the fact that in the Sony conference this year, they're going to announce the PS4 Pro getting a drop to $349. And even if they do keep it at $399, it's still going to be $100 cheaper than the Xbox One X. Which, when you have mom inside the store looking between two different game consoles, and one of them's $100 cheaper than the other, and what she saw on TV and what heard like everyone talking about, they're running basically the same games in similar, like on the TV they look like with the same graphics. Oh, of course, I'm going to go for the cheaper one. And plus, not to mention, a lot of people already have the PS4 this generation, so a lot of kids are going to want the PS4 because they want to play with their friends. Listen, I'm not trying to sit here and shit-talk the Xbox One X for no reason. I'm getting one. I've said it multiple times, I'm getting one. November 7th, day one, I'll be walking into Best Buy and buying the Xbox One X so I can finally close that stupid gap on my TV stand, and I love collecting new tech. I don't want to talk trash about it. I want the Xbox brand to do well. But this generation, Microsoft is just floundering like crazy. They're just not doing a good job. They didn't really announce any shockingly good, system-selling, amazing games. Like when Horizon Zero Dawn was shown off. That made people shit their pants. Mostly because it was pretty, but then people started hearing, holy crap, this game's actually really good. I'm just using Sony as an example because that's the main competitor to Microsoft right now, although don't be surprised if Nintendo catches up and closes the gap on their end. Speaking of that, you bet your ass that Breath of the Wild was a major reason why people bought a Switch, because not many people owned a Wii U, and if you were to buy one of two systems to play the same game, would you rather buy the new one that is you're pretty sure is going to get supported more, or are you going to buy the old dead system that basically did not get taken care of enough? You're going to buy the new one, and so yeah, Zelda Breath of the Wild did push Switches, and Breath of the Wild is much more of a high-quality game than any of these games that were shown off exclusive to Xbox now, in terms of just how much praise it's going to get and how much fun it's going to be. And I know I'm sounding like a major fanboy right now, but it's true. It's true. So, here's what I think. I think that the Xbox One X is going to sell well, as expected. I actually think it's going to pick up the sales pace of the Xbox One, but I don't think that it's going to sell like hotcakes. I don't think it's going to be impossible to find on store shelves. I think it's going to sell respectably. It's going to keep Microsoft's pace going, but they're not going to catch up with Sony. And Sony tomorrow is going to be showing stuff such as the new Spider-Man game and a lot of other games. Are they showing Death Stranding too? Plus, whatever stuff they haven't announced yet, they're going to be showing a shitload of stuff. And even Nintendo, with their 25-minute-long Direct, is going to show off quite a few heavy hitters in the Direct. But don't forget that Nintendo announces a lot of stuff after the main presentation is over. So Microsoft, you got yourself a cool console coming, but you showed off about 1 billion shooters, and your first game that you showed off was a driving game, and your console's going to be the most expensive console in the market. I think that I think this conference was good if you're already an Xbox fan. Xbox fans are being treated pretty well from this conference. Oh, I forgot to mention, Xbox One is getting original Xbox backwards compatibility. I got a whole other video coming on that soon. I want to basically, I want to scold Sony for a bit for not following what Microsoft is doing there. But we're getting original Xbox backwards compatibility, which makes me pretty happy. I mean, I want to play Jet Set Radio Future that doesn't have drastic slowdown like playing it on the 360 does, and I don't want to freaking hook up my original Xbox to my main HD TV. Yeah, this conference was good for people who are already Xbox fans, and I think it will get some people interested in buying the Xbox One, but I didn't really see any, like, during the conference, they focused on graphics a lot. Like, that was pretty much their main focus, but strangely enough, they didn't really do a good job emphasizing, to an average casual consumer, they didn't do a very good job emphasizing what exactly 4K means and what kind of difference it could make. And that's a shame. They better change their marketing when they get to the TV. Maybe become aggressive, I don't know. But they need to change something, because if I was just a casual consumer coming in, I would not really know what the selling point of this console is. All I would know is that it is several $100s more than the base model. It's more expensive than Sony's high-end, quote-unquote, 4K system, up to $100 to $150 more expensive, depending on what we see Sony drop the price to. Basically, I don't know, I'm rambling here, and I don't even remember what I've said so far. But basically, I grade this conference I would say a B- or a C. It's hard to exactly say where. It was very much a it was a good conference. I'd say it was good. They announced a lot of stuff, they announced a cool new system, and they didn't have any pacing problems. But the games they showed off still were not enticing, super good system sellers, and Sony and Nintendo are going to once again curb stomp Microsoft when it comes to this fact, despite all the other cool stuff that Microsoft has shown off. This conference wasn't bad. I want to emphasize that. It was not bad. But here's the thing. The Xbox One is not in a good state right now. It is falling behind Sony tremendously, and it's also being outsold like crazy by the Switch. Obviously, the total numbers of the Switch don't match the Xbox One yet, but Microsoft needed an absolutely amazing, mind-blowingly good conference with amazing game after amazing game, stuff we didn't expect. They needed that in this E3 in order to basically kind of reverse the damage that has already been done to the Xbox One, and they didn't deliver in that aspect, and it's a damn shame, because this was totally the E3 that Microsoft could have turned everything around, and I could have been way more excited for my Xbox One X. And that just isn't really going to be happening. Like I said, still excited for it, but what's the average consumer going to be like? I don't think that they did an amazing job this E3, and they should have. They needed it, and they didn't, and that's a shame. Anyways, those are my rambling thoughts for this. I know I've been picking up videos lately, which makes me happy. I definitely, just from this conference alone, my next video, or at least one of my next videos I want to make, is going to be about the fact that the PS4 still doesn't have any backwards compatibility on it besides PlayStation Now. And I understand lack of PS3, you know, the architecture, but there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that I can't stick a PS1 or PS2 disc inside my PS4 and it can't just emulate those games from the get-go, every single one of them. I mean, the PS2 and PS1 are pretty well understood, well emulated systems on the PC, and the PS4 is more than powerful enough to play those games. So we should be getting that emulation, and it sucks that Sony just makes fun of backwards compatibility and doesn't like it that much. It's a damn shame. I also am not going to be able to live stream or anything. I'm not even going to watch the Nintendo stream live because I'm going to be at work. So I'm going to avoid social media for that day and then make a video probably the next day or when I get home, depending on when I get home that day. It's going to be kind of late. But yeah, that's it for now. Thank you for kind of sitting through my long rambling here. Hopefully you enjoyed this a little bit. I actually don't really know if, because I have my car's air conditioning kind of blowing on my phone here so it doesn't overheat while it's recording. So if you're hearing any air rushing, I hope that didn't ruin this. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see all you guys next time.